Welcome back, and today we are playing out the JAS39 Gripen E in the Swedish tech tree. And the main change that you are going to be experiencing in this thing is that you go from 6 missiles to 7 Amraams. And this is the biggest change that you will really notice. The flight performance is also a little bit different, however. It is heavier, but it's offset by the better engine. Thrust weight is relatively the same. It's a ton heavier, thus the wing loading should be worse. However, it also gets a slightly bigger wingspan, offsetting it again. So overall, you're looking at the same thrust weight, same type of wing loading. It's a little bit different, but it comes very close. But the weight is still something that you will notice, and it's something that you kind of have to work with. Now overall, you're not really gonna notice this different unless you run into another Gripen, a Gripen C for example, or if you run into something like an F-16A in a dogfight. Luckily, this doesn't really happen, but do be careful that the flight performance is ever so slightly worse, and you do need to be mindful of it. This does not mean that the flight performance is bad. On the contrary, it's still incredibly good when it comes to 1v1 performance, missile jousting and all that good stuff. The plane is relatively small, it turns tightly, and it's able to get missiles off relatively easily from the offboard. Just be careful that you only have RB99s, and these are not the best when it comes to shooting high offboard targets that are relatively close, because they don't turn that hard off the rail. And it's the same thing with the RB74Ms, which are again basically AIM-9Ms. They don't turn the best off the rails, but luckily that performance gap is kind of closed by the fact that this thing has incredibly strong flight performance. The close range stuff isn't that big of a deal because the plane itself is a very good substitute for this weakness. Now of course, these super close range dogfights and stuff don't really happen all that often, and that's why I tried to force them by going around the map and kind of counter flanking. I am going to be a bit of a deck goblin. I'm going to be flanking, I'm going to be looking for stragglers, and right here you can also tell I pop on over. This guy is notching my entire team, but I am directly underneath him. So we just pitch up, shoot off a missile, we go into the notch, and then we just chaff and notch his missile. One thing that I do want to mention, that the MAW only drops flares at this very moment, so you do need to manually drop chaff as well if you actually want to notch properly. You can of course notch without chaff, but you have 344 of it anyway if you split it 50-50, so why would you make your life harder if you can simply just notch the missile? This is probably a bug, I'm not entirely sure, but considering most MAWs drop both, I'm gonna assume that it's the same thing for the Gripen. Here we do the same thing, we kind of go underneath the entire flank. We shoot up at the Su-27 and the Su-30. We get the Su-30 actually, and then we go back into the terrain and we look for our next victim. Now the second we come up over the mountain range here, we see an F-15, an Su-30 that is relatively far away, but we also notice a J-10 that is actually pretty close, 8 kilometers to be exact. We shoot off the missile, we go into the notch, and I know I have the room here to just dip into the mountain range and be completely safe. The J-10C has better missiles at close range, so I don't want to merge anywhere within 6 to 7 kilometers, because there is just a chance that I am going to be at a massive disadvantage. And right here I am at a massive disadvantage, because this is exactly what happens. He merges at about 4 kilometers, I go into the terrain, my missile has nowhere near the room to pull in there, and I get him extremely closely on my 6. I'm going a little bit slow here to make sure that he overshoots, but we are at a decently high altitude map. We are at about 3.5 kilometers. And this makes my merge incredibly weak. I'm at a disadvantage here, and I need to be careful that I don't burn all my energy. I need to get out of his nose. The J-10C pulls a lot of AOA, so I want to make sure that I keep this turn somewhat flat, and I try to stay off his nose as much as I can. This guy is doing vertical loops, I'm doing horizontal loops, and I'm trying to get underneath him here and force him into making a play. And he does actually make a turnaround, he reverses his turn, and I should kill him right here, but this is the second game that I do in about a year in the Gripen, and I have no idea where this gun is going, so I'm just gonna be missing everything. But you can tell that I'm slower than him, he needs to constantly turn around, I'm behind him, I have the position, and eventually he will fly directly into my guns. Before we talk about the rest, I just want to very quickly talk about my decal. I'm not entirely satisfied with the return to the hangar decal, so I will be cycling it out when the sales drop this time around. First day of the sales, we will be going back to the skill issue, and hopefully I will have the ability to go to the new decal when the second week of the sale drops, but I cannot promise you that just yet. Just know that in the future I will be cycling them again, so if you're missing out right now, don't worry, they will all come back. F-15 comes in, shoots from behind, almost hits us. Second missile comes in, we notch it properly with manual chaff, because the MAW will not take care of that, and we go into a bit of a missile joust. You know, you can tell that I can get my nose around a lot quicker than he can. We notch 3 kilometers, we have another shot here, and slowly but surely we are getting closer to each other. And when you both have Amraams, you really want to be careful whenever the Gripen gets within 2 kilometers again, because the flight performance here is just incredibly strong. We switch on over to an AIM-9M, we severe him, and we get the kill. Luckily we have some teammates around, which means that we then go back into the terrain here, and again I try the counter flank. Now personally I'm not a massive fan when it comes to BVRing in the Gripen, and that's mainly because it doesn't have the most amount of missiles. 7, it's respectable, but it's not that much. And if you shoot off 2 to 3 at the start, you're not going to have that much left for the rest of the game. And I think that this thing excels in medium to closer range combat. As long as you don't get in that 3 to 6 kilometers range where your Amraams are kind of shitty off-ball, this thing is completely golden. That's definitely the weakest link of this airframe. So I really try to get either very close to the enemy or try to kind of stay away from the area where your Amraams are not that great. If this thing had some missiles like Mikas or something like that, it would of course be incredibly strong for an airframe like this. But unfortunately, that's not what we have. And I do think that overall it would be a better plane. I do think that having long-range missiles is less important on a frame like this, because you don't really want to keep people at arm's length. You just want to reel them in, merge with them, and then just kind of stomp on their face. Now unfortunately, if you play optimally, this is not really going to happen, and that's why I just tried to close the gap on whoever I could. Here we have another F-15. He kind of shows up out of nowhere. I didn't expect him. I noticed that MRAM coming off, so I pulled to the left because I know that missile is never going to be able to pull into me. We close the gap, AIM-9M. He actually flares it, which is good on him. Not really able to get another lock. He's pre-flaring. AIM-9M is not gonna work out, so we double tap him with the 27mm. And I'm not entirely sure if the 27 actually got changed with this patch. A lot of cannons actually did, but the cannon overall felt pretty decent, and every time I managed to get a hit in, it overall actually ended up with a kill. Here we are being ran down by another F-15. For some reason F-15s really like running down the Gripens. I'm multi-padding, I'm trying to outrun his missiles by going cold, and overall this is rather effective because he's just far enough away. We are in the thickest air that we can be, and I'm just waiting for a good mountain to make a 180 without actually opening myself up for a counterattack. So here we notice a little bit of a dip, pretty big ridgeline. We turn around, we close the gap here, and we should be able to actually shoot a missile at him. Actually have the AIM-9M selected, switch on over to the RB99, pull back into the terrain. And just like that, we hug the mountain, it hits the mountain, and that's all she wrote. A little bit later, we start finding an F-18, and he is somewhere in this ridge. Not entirely sure where he is until I see that missile coming off, so I go a little bit lower, I go sideways here, I pre-flare for the AIM-9M, and I know that if I merge with him, I have a pretty simple job to just stay behind him. I know that he has that instantaneous turn, he doesn't really use it. He tries to break off, gives me a lot of room, and because of that I'm able to just kind of slot in behind him and wait for the shot. You can tell that he's going rather slow now, and at this kind of speed the Hornet is never going to be able to claw that position back. He goes down, and then the next match we actually find ourselves in a little bit of a rough spot. We are in the middle of the map, and sometimes when there is no ways to hide my flank, or when it's very flat maps, Golan Heights, this map, Sinai for example, if it's completely flat, I know that I'm gonna be picked up by everyone's ASAR radar the second I move at all. So I just go through the middle and try to engage as many people as possible at the same time. Is this ideal? No, but the Gripen is pretty good at it, and it is able to hold its own, and at the very least this makes it so that my team has a lot of room to actually move around. And the next best thing, you can just rain down everyone that flies underneath you, which is honestly a pretty common occurrence. The missile here misses, we dodge another missile. Unfortunately he's in a multipad, but he's actually close enough to the point where I can launch an AIM-9M at him. I want him out of the lobby, and then we start defending against the Eurofighter that is on our RWR. We notch his missiles, and the second I see those missiles go to Narnia, I shoot one back. And if he doesn't notch this, he dies. And if he does notch it, I have the ability to counterattack. He just flies straight into it. We notch his missile. And that is the end of the game already. That's just how quick these matches are. But most of you should be familiar with that at this point. Now here we have a little bit more terrain. But my team was kind of spread out. They were going everywhere. So if I try to hide in the terrain, they're probably going to be looking at maybe the Su-27 in front of me. Or someone else, so I'm probably going to be spotted by them looking at someone else that's next to me. So this time around I'm actually going to keep a little bit of altitude and try to contest at medium range. But I'm getting fired on, so we actually turn around. But I do notice a couple of guys that are right over there. They are in that little mountain dip, not the valley I guess we can call it. And I'm going to wait for that furball to develop a little bit more. And then I'm going to be re-engaging. But you can tell that I'm not instantly going in. I'm kind of doing a loop around. Now don't make your loop around too big. Because if you take too much time, your team is going to be gone. It's going to be 3v1. And the likelihood of you winning that are pretty slim. The JAS39 here isn't really paying attention. He kind of just flies over the furball. He's flying perfectly straight. So we fire a missile at him to just pressure him. He actually turns around, which is a pretty decent deal. I don't get a hit, but at least he's going to fly towards the furball, which allows me to engage both of them basically back to back. But I do want to be careful that he doesn't regroup actually, because then again it's going to be a bit of a 3v1. So we launch the missile on the F2A, we then launch on the JAS39 because he's flying relatively high and it looks like he's engaging the other Gripen. So I'm actually going to make sure that he catches that missile because he is probably going to be busy with something else. And that's exactly what happens. The Gripen goes down, the F2A gets pushed away, we then headbutt an F-15 in the face with an Amram, and then the Su-27 comes in, or at least on the RWR, and he is just kind of catching strays at this point because we have a very easy time notching that. He goes down, it's a J11B actually, and that is going to be the match. F-15 is crit, and just like that we get a relatively free triple kill by just disengaging and then re-engaging whenever it feels like the time is right. Of course, a triple kill and the F-15, he is crit, but he is going to be wiped out by another friendly. Now here is the last game of today. And again, everyone is everywhere, so I'm actually going to punch through the middle at medium to high altitude and see who I can find. And you can tell that at the start here with the radar, I couldn't really find anyone. And then I noticed these guys on the flank. So I'm just going to cycle through them, I'm going to ripple off a couple of missiles, and then I'm going to break off and go for the F-15 that's directly on my left here. We are going to lock onto him. He is already kind of side on, so it might actually get notched relatively easily. But if he starts notching this, I can very easily close the gap because he doesn't actually have the room anymore to escape me whatsoever. F-15 gets crit, we then get a triple kill on the deck, and just like that we basically neutralize 4 people in the span of 30 seconds. And this is why it's important to be in a good position and just get that little bit of luck. F-15 is crit, he is not actually gonna die to us, he's about to be wiped out by someone else as well. And we are getting shot at because we just got spotted by the F-15. All of China knows we're here and we need to be careful here. But I also know that they are going to be engaging us. They hopefully think that I'm alone here and then that they fly directly at me and I get to collect some free counter kills. But we just have to wait and see on what they do. Su-27, 16 kilometers away. Look at the missile flying behind me, and I'm just trying to find people to actually shoot. Su-27, this time 13 clicks out, and another one that's actually relatively close as well. It's a Mirage 2000. Now what do? We just start notching after launching. I don't really want to deal with Mikas and R77s. Su-30 is already crit, but it looks like he is not really carrying whatsoever. 7 missiles flying into my direction. We just go into the notch, we drop 2 billion chaff, and just like that we are free to do whatever we want. Send out a missile to the deck as well as we notch another missile from the Su-30, and then we switch on over from the F-15 to the Su-30 to get another free kill. AIM-9M is going to be sent in his direction, and from 3 kilometers from this kind of angle, if he doesn't actually notice that I'm coming in with one, it's probably going to hit him. He is flaring a little bit, but he's not flaring properly, and because of that he's gonna be sent straight to the Shadow Realm, and we disengage. Now we have an F-15 on our 6, we only have 1 missile left, and we already have 5 kills, but I do want to disengage for a second here because I'm not feeling very good about the position that I'm currently in. We have a J-10 and a Eurofighter directly on our 6, so we are just gonna do a little bit of a wide loop around here and come back in when they are done engaging the dude that they are engaging right now. Can I really contest these guys in a head-on? No, not really, but I can at least keep them busy and try to force a merge. And in a merge, I'm competitive with all of these guys, especially with sub 10 minutes of fuel and basically no missiles on the rails. It's a pretty damn good dogfighter still, as I mentioned earlier. And there's the Eurofighter. Now this guy is going incredibly fast. He is absolutely ripping it up. I can't really go high. We pre-flare a little bit in case he sends an A9M my way. J10 is directly behind us, and I turn around for the Eurofighter. Now the Eurofighter is going to be way too fast, and I'm not going to be able to aim 9 him whatsoever. If I fire it here, it's going to fall like a kilometer short. So we just kind of push the EF2000 away, and then we turn around towards the J10. But Mr. Mirage over here sends a Mika directly onto his forehead, but he's not actually dead, and I'm not about to get flat spinned or something like that. If he is severed, he's not going to be able to do so, but I'm not entirely sure if he is. So we just send an AIM-9 his way. It's only a crit, so chances are he was already severed, and I just wasted a missile. But I'm not really too worried, because I know I can handle a Eurofighter if he actually decides to face me. Now there is a chance that he just starts doing this, where he goes on the deck max speed and kind of just slashing attacks. But he needs to do something. I don't have missiles, but hopefully neither does he. I try to cut him off here as he's trying to go for my squad mate that's in a bit of a flat spin. I get pretty close, but he's just at that little bit too slippery for me to actually hit him at this range, even with the radar gun sight. Every time I squeeze the trigger, he just kind of moves and my rounds don't go anywhere. He obliterates my squad mate, but now I'm actually within a kilometer. He's turning somewhat. I'm cutting him off. I'm going over Mach. I'm going to be closing the gap pretty simply here. You can tell that my radar gun sight is just absolutely going ballistic and not in a good way. And at this point, I'm pretty much golden. I'm directly on a 6, but there is a friendly missile coming in, so I don't want to stick around that long. I'm just going to make one pass. I'm going to keep my speed here, and if he tries to slow down too much, I'm just going to overshoot and loop around. We get a hit, we disengage, and he is going to be absolutely obliterated by the Ravioli with Mikas from directly behind. It's a good thing I broke off, because otherwise I'd be dead right here. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow with probably a Typhoon or an F-18 video.